he got a lot worse. And our wonderful neighbor next door, Desi Stitzer, who was so sweet, came over and would help Mother and help her with his blood pressure. Sometimes she'd stay with him while Mother did the shopping. But Dad often loved to go with Mother. The problem was that one time they came back from the store and he was sitting in the car and Mother was unloading the groceries and he was happily sitting there. And so she said, you know, Ellis, it's time to get out and have lunch. And he wouldn't get out. And so she came back in an hour and he wouldn't get out. He did not get out until it was dark.
And one day she called me and said she'd just gotten back from the emergency room and they'd had to pump his stomach. Do you remember that?
Oh, I'd forgotten that.
He was she found him in the garage mixing pesticides. He was mixing pesticides and stirring them like he would stir cereal in the morning, and he was drinking it. He was fixing dinner, he was fixing food. He didn't know that he wasn't in the kitchen, he didn't know he was in the garage mixing pesticide, and she took him to the emergency room and they pumped his stomach. But that was just before she finally said, I can't take care of him.
And grandmother, I remember just the real devotion that she showed in taking care of him. She's tiny, she has really delicate fingers that have done this beautiful needlework for ages, and he's big, so having to assist him, one of the things that happened, it was really frightening for him to walk. His sense of balance, everything was affected, so even taking a step was really challenging, and she needed, in order to help take care of him, she needed to help support him a lot in just moving through the house and getting into bed, getting bathed. So it was physically really taxing, and I think for a long time she continued to be the primary caregiver when I know it must have been really challenging for her. I know, like, when I came, the weekends that I was there, she didn't, and she didn't talk about somebody regularly coming in, so I'm not sure. But it was a real example to me of her love for him and their dedication to each other, watching her take care of him.
She was worried about physically, she said, when he can't get in and out of the tub, I won't be able to lift him.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was bigger, I mean, he was lots.
It would have been impossible for her to lift him.
And I wonder what it was like for Grandma to see her spouse change in a lot of ways. But, you know, I never heard her complain. I saw such patience from her.
The Heavenly Father really blessed Mother. She had a very tough time, very challenging, and she was so sweet with him, and it was so discouraging. But he really, I mean, she hung in there, and he blessed her. Doug had come out a year before and had given Dad a blessing, Mother a blessing, and me a blessing. One of the promises to Mother was that she would know when it was time that she could no longer care for Dad, and that she would have to hand him to someone who could care. And so she and I started looking for care centers that were good. There was a brand new one that had barely opened up just weeks before. And on his birthday, oh, this was just, I'll never forget this day. We had a birthday lunch for him, we gave him gifts, we talked to him, and then we took him to the care center, made sure that he was all settled and everything was fine. And then she and I came back and sat at the kitchen table and just wept and wept and wept and wept. But we absolutely knew it was right. And what was lovely was he always loved people, and he was so isolated by himself. When he got worse, people would come and visit him, but then they were gone. And he just wasn't around enough people. I was in Salt Lake working. I'd come home on weekends. Mother had stuff to do, to run almost an acre of ground and a household, a big house, and take care of him. And so he was alone a lot. And when he was in the care center, he was around all these other people about his age, and all of the nurses and the aides that loved him and spoke with him, and he was happier. And that made us happy. And Mother went every day and saw him.
When we were at the nursing home, Vern wrote down a story of one of the attendants said how much he wished he had known Dad because he is so smiling and he always thanked him. And he said that wasn't typical for an Alzheimer patient, to be so positive and so grateful. And he said he was a good man. I started knowing him when he was younger.
But I remember visiting him in the facility, and I remember him realizing that he did not know me, but that was okay, because he loved me. I could tell that even though he didn't remember my name, he knew I was a part of the family. And so despite the fact that his memory was not there, his love was still very present and very accepting. And I remember him just smiling and listening intently to whatever I had to say.
But I remember the last time I saw him, I believe he was in a care center. Because I remember everyone was kind of leaving and I didn't want to go because I knew it was the last time I'd see him. I just knew it. And and I remember he had a children's book and it was about a cowboy. And there was a cowboy in a corral with a horse, and I remember he was just telling me all about this cowboy. And it was just so sweet. I thought my grandfather has turned into a child. It was sweet.
But many months before that, I remember we all got together and talked about his funeral long before it happened.
In August, we had talked about everybody coming out. We need a family picture. We need a family picture. It was this family picture. And sadly, not everybody's in it because Jim Williamson was staying home with the children and Jan McAllister was staying home with the children so that Helen Marr and Doug could come. But John and Vern were there, and this picture was taken in the care center when, in August, when Dad wasn't doing very well. And we thought it was miraculous. He's got such a great smile. And the Haynes people who took it had been neighbors of Mother and Dad's on Brinker years before, and I remember them from the 12th Ward.
At the time of the photo, I came with Clark. Clark was a tiny baby. And I remember putting Clark on his lap, and he was so warm and sweet with Clark. Couldn't talk to him, couldn't communicate with him, but you could tell he knew how to relate to a baby.
And then all of the priesthood in our family who were there, Vern, John, Doug, gave Dad a blessing. And I remember they blessed him that his mission was completed. And so everybody loved thinking he'll pass away soon. And I thought, no, he won't. You know, because most of the answers to my prayers were answered way in the future. And I thought that he could live for another year or 2 or 3. I just really felt that because my experience had been, it took a long time for the most important prayers to be answered, and it could be a long time. Well, that was August, and by October, he was gone. And what had happened in the meantime, he contracted pneumonia, and they said to us, and he was up and about and walking and things, but he got pneumonia, and they said, the doctor said, what do you want to do about this? We can heal him, we can get him better. And it was the easiest decision that Mother and I ever made. We just looked at each other and said, why? Why? For so long, we had seen him in a situation where he couldn't get better in his mind, and he couldn't die. And he was in between. There was no entrance, there was no exit. He was in limbo. And we just said, let him get on with his life. That's when having a testimony of the gospel is so precious, because you just knew that he could get on with his life, and it was great. And so what happened was they kept him very comfortable, and we were there during General Conference, and I remember walking out of the room or into the room, and the Tabernacle Choir was singing "The Lord is My Shepherd." And it was just a very sweet conference weekend that we spent.
I still remember vividly the moment when I heard of my father's death. I was living in the woods in Findlay, Ohio. It was October, and I could see from my kitchen window the ground covered with gold and orange leaves. The sky was bright blue, and I thought, how beautiful, how fitting for him to graduate at the season of the harvest. This glorious time of year.
The date of Dad's death, the way it all happened, it was just a tender mercy. Everything was just very tender and sweet. I came up from Salt Lake, and it was early in the morning, and we walked into the room, and it was the first time I had seen someone other than grandmother or friends of my parents who had passed away. And I was concerned because I wasn't sure how I would feel. And I prayed a lot about it. And I remember walking into the room with Mother, and there was this very sweet, peaceful feeling. But the most important feeling for me was that it was so obvious he was gone. His body was there on the bed, and he was gone. It was just absolute. It was an absolute testimony to me of the reality of the next life and resurrection. And so, and I felt really prompted. You know, sometimes in your life you really feel like the Spirit is guiding you, and other times you're not sure. And this time I absolutely felt guided, and I think it was for the sake of Mother. I said, let's have prayer. And so we knelt by his body, and I offered this prayer that didn't come from me. And we had prayer, and then we left. It was just a really interesting experience, and one that I was very grateful for. And I could see all the reasons why I wasn't supposed to stay in the East, why I was supposed to come West. And I'm very grateful, you know, that was the case.
Sometimes when a man dies, he leaves his children gifts of values with his estate, which they cherish with his memory. But the gift he gave me that summer will always be my most cherished gift from him. It was this glove. Worn out from long days of work and discolored by perspiration, soil, and weather, and pinned to it was a small piece of paper with the words, "A soft answer turneth away wrath." I don't know what Dad intended in giving this gift, but I will always treasure it. To me, it symbolizes his legacy to us, his children, a life of work in service to God and his fellow men, and a soft answer.
Well, and when he died, here's an interesting thing. He died with this great muscle tone. He was 75, and he was 1985. He was 76, and he just had a flat stomach, and just strong arms. He was just toned, and he was that way his whole life.
We felt a sense of relief because we did not. He was a very strong, healthy man, and we could see him living with this Alzheimer's for decades.
And being miserable. He knew, he was so frustrated because he knew he couldn't remember what he needed to remember. When he couldn't remember our names.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember
So
him
there
not
was a
remembering.
sense of relief,
Yeah.
and and there was, well, I kind of say that in Moms, there was a sense of joy. It wasn't, with both of their deaths, we were expecting, I guess we weren't really expecting my father's that soon, but we knew that he wasn't ever going to really get better, so.
I remember when he passed away, it was hard, but I remember one Sunday sitting on the couch and I was reading a book. It was by Richard Paul Evans, and it just had a lot of scriptures and quotes in there. You know, it was pretty soon after he passed away, and I was just kind of thinking about him and kind of looking for comfort, I guess. And I opened up this book and I was reading, and this scripture, the one about my peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you, and then it goes on to say, in my Father's house there are many mansions, and I go before you to prepare a place for you. When I read that, I thought, oh, Grandpa just went to prepare a place for us. And after that, I was totally okay. I understood that he was in heaven preparing a place for his children, and I was totally okay with that.
My father's funeral was the same way. We all talked about our memories of him, and it was a wonderful celebration of a life. I think a funeral should be a celebration of a life. and also the celebration of eternal life. Marianne showed my father's glove and said, you know, he had worn out like that glove. And she spoke about that at his funeral.
They were really special. It was wonderful to hear the families speak about each one. But it was wonderful to greet the many friends who came and told the many times their lives were touched by one or the other. Things that they did that we often didn't know. Because it felt like his life was rather shorter, but he'd done so much. It's not the years we lived, so I guess it really doesn't matter, but at the moment it felt, you know, when he passed away, that he had so much still to give. But I thought he gave so much as he was older, too.
He died my freshman year of college, so I was there for his funeral. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I sang at his funeral. I remember just the funeral and all the different things going around.
There were lots of people that came, and I know that he had an impact on a lot of people's lives. And I think I didn't know that so much personally because when we were there, they were really focused on us being there. So we only saw a little slice of what their life was. But I know my mom telling stories of, they always welcomed people into their home, and they always were finding ways to do something to give other people a lift or a helping hand. I think they touched a lot of people's lives, and so there were a lot of people who came. I remember Maylee and I were asked to sing for it, and it was the first time that I'd been to a funeral for anybody that I knew personally. And I was fine until I got up to sing, and then I just felt so choked up. Thank goodness Maylee could just sing steadily through the whole thing. It was pretty much a solo with me standing there just sobbing, but she kept her composure. But I just really felt his presence there strongly. I knew that he, had moved on and was very vital, and I just felt that he was present, and it was a really strong impression for me.
After he passed away, Mom had to decide what she wanted to do with his headstone. And she said, I'd like to put grapes on the headstone. And she was so artistic, and she had done grapes for a quilt, or she had done something like that with a quilt, and she had patterns. And so she put together a drawing, and we took it down to the Bott Monument Company. And a lot of us had gone to school with the Botts, and they had all gone through Ben Lomond when Dad had been principal, and they were very happy to do the headstone. And so there are grapes on the headstone, and Mother made sure that all of our names were on the back, which I thought was just so wise.
I don't think he ever made more than $15,000 a year, but he left my mother financially independent. I cannot express the gratitude I feel at the thrift and foresight that he had.
I do remember a few weeks later, so it would have been, he died in October, and so it would have been maybe at Thanksgiving or at Christmas when I was with Grandma, or maybe even, I would visit her a lot on the holidays. And I remember sitting at the kitchen table, and we were working, or I was studying, I can't remember what I was doing. And I remember all of a sudden Grandma just starting to cry, and she looked at me and said, oh, I miss him, Maylee. I just miss Ellis. And as a teenager, I did not know how to respond. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, Grandma. But I could feel the anguish that she had, and I remember that. I knew she knew the plan of salvation. I knew she knew about that she would see him again. It was just, I just miss him. It taught me that they had a wonderful marriage. They had a wonderful marriage, and I'm so grateful to have come from a family with a wonderful marriage. I'm so grateful for